Blessings, beloveds. Welcome back. Let's talk about the full moon in Virgo. I've been sitting here the past 2 hours waiting for this terrible sound to stop. Someone's been chopping a tree, which really breaks my heart when I see trees being chopped, but that's another story. Anyway, it's been incredibly disruptive, and I was just thinking about transiting Uranus. Uranus is the body that corresponds to many things, but one thing it corresponds to is disruptions, unpredictable, disruptive, chaotic type of events taking place. And I've had transiting Uranus in my fourth house for quite some time, actually, a few years already. And it's been really interesting, but really disruptive, incredibly disruptive. There's been numerous occasions where I've had to put my clients off, reschedule, not be able to do a video. It's it's really, really challenging actually to just deal with that kind of interruption because I work from home. I'm home all the time, so this is where I am, and so yeah. Anyway. It's just fresh because I just had a 2 hour zone where I literally couldn't do anything. So anyway, that's that. But, have a think about if you have transiting Uranus in your fourth house. I'd be interested to hear your comments about whether you've had the experience of various disruptions, whether it's somebody building next door to you or whether you are rebuilding parts of your own home and you've had all sorts of chaotic, disruptive things take place. Just be interested to hear if there's anyone out there with that experience, such as myself as well. So the full moon in Virgo is looking like a really beautiful full moon. It's a regular full moon, so it's not a lunar eclipse. We've got some eclipses coming up later this year, and we'll talk about those as we get closer to them. So the first thing always is to have a look at where this lunation cycle began. And so it began 14 days ago at the new moon, which was at 23 degrees of Aquarius. Now, that chart itself was also very promising. That in other words, the beginning of that new moon cycle, it was that really large stellium of Aquarius planets, right? There was so many planets in Aquarius. And there was also a very prominent placement of Jupiter there as well. So because of that, because of Jupiter's presence at the new moon 2 weeks ago, then we can say that this lunation cycle has a very prominent Jupiter flavor about it. And we should always be grateful and happy when we have the presence of Jupiter, particularly in a sign where it does quite well. Jupiter is a benefic planet, so it doesn't inherently bring any harm of any sort. It just is the case that through the nature of dignities, that is, when a planet is dignified, through the sign that it's in, as in the planet that it rules or its exaltation, and the opposite to that, of course, is when a planet is debilitated and is in fall or detriment, for instance, then planets can lose some of their power, as it were, relative to traditional ancient astrology. Now, of course, there are many ways of measuring that, and it's not a case of just picking one isolated thing in the chart and looking at that and making a definitive sort of prediction or statement. It's really, we always have to take into account a number of different things relative to what the chart that we're actually assessing. But Jupiter in Aquarius, in other words, which is where it is at the moment, is a really great sign for Jupiter. Aquarius, which connects to the 11th house, is the house of the guardian daemon in traditional ancient astrology. It's the house where a lot of our dreams and wishes are activated. And so Aquarius has that signature to it as well. So Jupiter in Aquarius is really wonderful, in a lot of different ways. And Jupiter itself is, as I said, it's a benefic planet, so it doesn't necessarily bring harm. And so the flavor of this whole lunation cycle that began 2 weeks ago has a very strong Jupiter flavor to it. And so that's important, because when I bring up the chart in a moment for this full moon, you'll also see that, Jupiter is there again. It's not aspecting the full moon necessarily, but in terms of the moment of the chart for the full moon, Jupiter again has a very strong presence. And it is also Venus that highlights actually this full moon, and that's another benefic. So we have the two benefics, Jupiter and Venus, both quite amplified. And in this particular full moon, Venus is in her exaltation position, and I want to talk about Venus in her exaltation position because it is such a beautiful, beautiful Venus. Venus is such a beautiful planet that brings, joy, happiness. Well, joy is more actually Jupiter, and happiness is Venus, but things that we enjoy and things that we love and things that please us, all those sorts of Venusian things are very amplified with this full moon because Venus is conjunct the sun. So let me just bring up the chart. So I'll just share my screen with you guys. And let's just get straight into the chart. So here we have the full moon chart. Now, this is based for Melbourne, Australia. So, just quickly, because this chart is based in Melbourne, Australia, then we could say for people who are living in Melbourne, for instance, then this full moon is going to really amplify relationships quite a lot. And it's going to anyway, because the sun is conjunct Venus, wherever you do the chart for, regardless of the location. But you can see for Melbourne, we have an extreme emphasis in the 7th house, right, which is relationships. So that's just a little side note. But you would do this chart for your own location. But more importantly, what you are really looking at is where was the new moon? In other words, where's 23 degrees of Aquarius in your own chart? And so whatever you began at that time relative to the new moon and everything that new moon symbolize, what has gradually gotten to the point now with the full moon, which you can see is at 8 degrees, almost 9 degrees of Virgo Pisces. So whatever began 14 days ago is now being highlighted, illuminated. Now, let me just go back to the new moon just so that we can get a picture of this. So, okay, I'll just have to adjust that. Okay, so it's around about there. So again, this is for Melbourne. Don't worry about the location of where everything is. You can see here in this new moon chart, there was the Venus-Jupiter conjunction. That's the two benefics together, side by side, pouring out so much love and blessings and abundance and wisdom. And, in the sign of Aquarius, it brings in a lot of matters to do with friendships as well. So you may have had, you may have joined a group during this time. You may have connected with a particular friend you haven't seen for a while, or you may have made some new friends, or you may have just become really popular on a particular platform that you're connecting with or that you are speaking on, and so forth. There's, numerous possibilities, but those are just some examples. For myself, this new moon was very interesting because it hits off all the Aquarius things in my own chart. And in fact, I had two friends recently, just during the beginning of this new moon, who sort of came back into my life again. So there's the Venus, Jupiter, Aquarius, and so on and so forth. So Jupiter and Venus are conjunct, as I said, during this new moon. we have this massive stellium in Aquarius. So the flavor of Jupiter and Venus actually is very strong for this whole lunation cycle. Now, let's go back to the full moon in Virgo. So there's a Sun Venus conjunction. Now, the this conjunction is termed as what's called a combust conjunction, which just basically means that it's an old traditional term that refers to a planet being up to 8 degrees uh, distant from the sun. And in traditional astrology, it's regarded as not necessarily such a great thing, because the the thinking behind it is that the sun's beams, the sun's light, is very powerful, and it kind of burns out any planet that's there, right? So I don't necessarily view it in those ways. I'm sort of, I think about it a little bit differently, especially because of the whole concept of the Venus star. Now, the Venus star is when the Sun and Venus are exactly conjunct, or they could be up to 16 minutes apart. That's called a cazimi. You've probably heard of that term. And we are actually approaching a cazimi conjunction with the Sun and Venus, which is occurring on the 26th of March. And so, what's happening at the moment with Venus is she's transforming from the morning star that she was previously, and she's preparing herself towards the evening star, which is what's going to happen on the 26th of March, when there is an exact Sun Venus conjunction at 5 degrees of Aries. That's going to be the evening star. Okay, so this is why we're seeing here, Venus and the Sun so close. So this is going to build up, over the next few weeks, and the Sun will, ingress into Aries, and Venus will ingress into Aries, and then by the time the 26th of March arrives, we will have that cazimi conjunction evening star. That's another story, and perhaps I'll actually do a separate, talk on that. But for the moment, here are the things to consider. Where was the new moon in your own chart? Where is 23 degrees of Aquarius? The other thing to consider is if you had, or have rather, planets at 12 degrees or 13 or 11 or 14 degrees, around about those degrees of Aquarius, because that Jupiter Venus conjunction, which was there just for a day or so, well, it's part of the lunation cycle. And so if you have planets at those degrees of Aquarius, then this lunation cycle is quite important for you from the start to the end, really. And we're only halfway through at the moment. And it really should bring about some kind of blessings. It really should bring about, we could say, some type of good fortune as well, because we're talking about two benefics, Jupiter and Venus being conjunct at the beginning of this lunation cycle. And now, as we've moved on 14 days later, then the things to pay attention to is, of course, do you have any planets at 8 degrees, between, let's say, 6 to 12 degrees of Pisces Virgo, right? So if you do, then, this full moon is basically sitting right on, those planets, either conjunct or opposite. And so, of course, that's going to amplify those planets for you. And you would start back to where this new moon started, which was 23 degrees of Aquarius, to kind of get a sense of where things began, because the new moon is literally the seed that's planted. So where 23 degrees of Aquarius is in your birth chart, what house it's in other words, then that's where the seed was planted relative to that new moon. 14 days later, which is when we arrive at this full moon, which is at Virgo Pisces, then there would be some sense of clarity or awareness or illumination or amplification of what perhaps began 2 weeks ago for you. Um, the full moon in this chart is bringing in quite strong relationship matters, The South Node is still conjunct Juno down here in Sagittarius. Now, the South and North Node really are actually squaring this full moon. So, they're coming into the picture as well. And of course, the South Node and the North Node always speak to, the South Node is the past, where we've been. And the North Node, of course, is the present and the future and the direction we're heading into. But the interesting thing here is that we have Sun Venus conjunction. That's the goddess of love right next to the sun. Now, one reason that Venus is not necessarily being hampered by the sun's rays here is because she's in her exaltation position. So Venus rules Taurus and Libra, and her exalted position is Pisces. And I have Venus in Pisces, so maybe I'm a bit biased, but Venus in Pisces is truly such a spectacular, magical place to have Venus. It inspires the poet, the musician, the artist, the dancer, the spiritual yearning and longing and connecting. Yearning and longing for the soulmate and things like that. But Venus in Pisces has so much empathy and compassion, has such a extraordinary appreciation of love and beauty, and has the capacity to really give so much of that, from herself or himself. It's Venus in Pisces stimulates and inspires the very rich experience or experiences of imagination, fantasy. It's a very tricky place from the point of view of, if you think about the symbol for Pisces, which is two fish swimming in opposite directions, bound by a silver cord, archetypally or symbolically, what it means a lot of different things. But one of the things it does mean is that in the archetype of Pisces, in the personality of Pisceans, or people who have strong Pisces in them, such as a Venus in Pisces, that's a very strong placement for Venus to be in Pisces. You may have nothing else in Pisces but just that, and that's enough to really point to that archetype being very active and very prominent in your makeup. Think about Venus. It corresponds to a lot of the inner dimensions of who we are, as well as the external dimensions, the inner dimensions relating to even the psychology of how we listen. Jeffrey Wolf Green says that Mercury is not the planet that corresponds to listening. Mercury corresponds to the anatomy of the ear, but the skill of listening, the art of listening, actually corresponds to Venus. So a well-placed Venus, in other words, is an individual who perhaps has incredible capacity for listening. Now, some people may think, well, what's the big deal? Doesn't everybody listen? No, in fact, they don't. And as a therapist, I know that very, very well, because that's primarily my job as a therapist. I listen, and I have that skill and that ability. And it is a skill and it is an art, and it's not necessarily something that everybody has the ability to do well. It's a good exercise actually to just kind of see for yourself, over the next day or so. Just have a look at how you interact with people and observe your own listening skills and abilities, and observe the other person's listening skills and abilities. And you'll see in most cases, people are talking over the top of each other, cutting each other's sentences off, changing the subject, distracted by their phone, distracted by something else. There's all these things that come into There's a bit of noise kicking back in. I hope it's not going to get any louder. So you'll notice that listening is it's quite it's a skillful art, and not necessarily everybody has the capacity to do. Now, this is important because this is what Venus actually corresponds to. Now, Venus in Pisces, as I was saying before, it's the the compassion, the spiritual desires and longing. Uh, it also connects to mysticism. The love of mysticism, spirituality, goddess, divine source, creation to all things, God, goddess. All of that. Pisces, right? And Venus. Venus is what we love. It's what we really, really love, right? And want to share and give and receive and experience, right? Now, going back to the two fish swimming in opposite directions, bound by a silver cord in the archetype of the Piscean individual, and you can observe this in people that you may know who are Pisceans, or yourself if you are a Piscean, or you have a Venus in Pisces for that matter. There's this split in certain ways, we could say, because the two fish are swimming in opposite directions, yet they are bound by a cord, which has several different meanings depending on which kind of lens you look through. But there are a couple of meanings that, regardless of which level you look through, that they would still be there. And what they are is this: that we incarnate into the physical body. That's one fish. And we also have a soul and a spirit, or we are a soul and a spirit. And the water signs corresponding to the past and memory. When we get to Pisces, there's this memory of a past this is Venus in Pisces, right? Particularly. There's a memory there for a longing of a past that was ecstatic, blissful, divine, beautiful, peaceful, just all loving, no judgments. And so, see, Venus in Pisces is the ability to love all. It's the capacity to love all because it doesn't have the criticism and the judgment that the opposite sign Virgo does. Now, that can pose problems as well. Venus in Pisces can produce experiences where you lack the ability to discern the truth about a person or a situation because you are so blindsided by the beauty and the ideal and the love that you want to see in a person or a relationship. And so there's this sense of holding on to the ideal, and that subsequently often leads to disappointment because no human being, when that is projected onto a human being, which is the case, no human being can live up to that ideal, that type of expectation. So it's a hook for disappointment, right? Now, Venus in Pisces, being in an exalted position, however, during this full moon, she's got a very prominent, powerful presence during this full moon. She's right there with the sun, being the king, the male sort of masculine principle, if you like. Venus, of course, is a feminine principle. This is not about gender. Okay, so I don't want people to misunderstand what I'm saying in that I'm splitting genders relative to the archetypes, because that's not the case. All of us have male and female within us, feminine and masculine. So that's a given. That's just there. But the planets and the archetypes, they do have, a feminine or a masculine or a neutral archetypal expression about them. It's not to say that they are just man or they are just woman, or only a man could feel this or only a woman could feel that. Not at all, because a woman has a sun sign and a man has a Venus sign. and one's a masculine planet and one's a feminine planet. So they're there for all of us. We are embodying all the archetypes, all the energies, all the time, regardless of our gender. Now, getting back to the Sun conjunct Venus, that's a beautiful omen, is what I'm trying to get at, really, simply put, because Venus, especially in this particular full moon, is in her exalted position. Now, exalted is a term that comes from old traditional astrology, medieval, Hellenistic, and you can look up the literal definition for exaltation, and you'll get a particular definition. But astrologically, it really just refers to exaltation. It's very similar to the literal definition. It's been sort of taken up, as it were, exalted, lifted up, So it's a very, very beautiful meaning, to be exalted. Think about when somebody is exonerated as well, from, I know it's not the same thing, but it just reminds me a little bit of it. When somebody has been alleged to have committed a particular crime, let's say, for instance, and at some point down the track they are exonerated from that. That means to be lifted up out of that. Very similar to exaltation. I know it's an example that's a little bit out there, but it is what it is. So here we have, Sun, Venus, man, woman, conjunct. Venus is exalted. So she's bringing in all the goods, she's bringing in all the love, all the goodness, all the beauty. She's relishing in this beautiful Piscean energy. She's exalted, so she's very happy. Now, so relationship themes can be quite prominent, in other words, during this full moon. Something really quite beautiful can happen, to somebody. There'll be somebody on this earth plane, probably several people, where this conjunction of Sun, Venus in Pisces, while Venus is exalted in Pisces, and how this accentuates something quite beautiful. Now, it can be very simple things, guys. It doesn't have to be something really miraculous. It can be, just a simple, beautiful dinner that your partner makes you, or, buys you flowers, or just does something really thoughtful and beautiful for you, and brings it as a gift, or you do that for them, vice versa. It can go either way, but something very beautiful. Now, on the external kind of physical level, right? But at a deeper spiritual level, esoteric level, evolutionary level, this brings us back into that space of remembering who we are, remembering that we are soul, that we are spirit above and beyond all else. Now, the moon in Virgo, which is where the full moon is in Virgo, is conjunct Vesta, because Vesta has been in Virgo for quite some time. She recently, not so long ago, went retrograde in Virgo. And so here we have another feminine principle. And I find this really quite interesting, actually, because so Virgo is the Dharma, the work that we do on ourselves. At the deepest level, it's the work we do on ourselves in order to become a better person, to become a better human being. And, and much deeper than that is the ability to be honest enough to look at our own patterns of behavior, or habits, or ways of doing things, or ways of being or acting, or whatever, and being able to see that clearly, and being able to be critically minded about what we see, in order to recognize what it is that needs further work. That obviously requires a lot of honesty. So looking at things through the lens of Virgo in a real practical and critical manner, right? So Virgo and Pisces are two of the most complex archetypes in the zodiac, as is Scorpio. They are the three most complex archetypes in the zodiac. So we have a full moon that's, highlighting, accentuating the Virgo Pisces archetypes, which is so largely connected to spirit and matter, you could say, spirit being Pisces, matter being Virgo. And the two are not separate. Going back to the symbolism of the two fish swimming in opposite directions, bound by a silver cord, is which I didn't finish speaking about before, it's the sense within the individual who is Piscean or has strong Pisces energy in their chart, who has this memory of having lived in a far more beautiful state of consciousness, of beingness. It's it's very difficult to put language around it, because that's why, we have poets and musicians and various types of artists who produce different type of work that emanates through being a muse or tuning into muse, which is where the word music comes from. So it creates this inspiration. When you have this beautiful work of art that's produced in the various different forms that it can be, that's tapping into that Pisces quality, that Pisces memory, remembering something that is so beautiful, so inspirational, all encompassed by love, the highest frequency and vibration of love, that has nothing to do with attachment, control, and so forth, right? That's not love at all. But a lot of people associate love with those types of desires, let's say. So Vesta in this story, I think, is really speaking to our level of devotion and how prepared we are as well to invest in the work that we're doing on ourselves spiritually. That's Vesta in Virgo. It's the getting down to reality, as it were, to examine and look at our own flaws, our own, insecurities, whatever it may be, in order to work on those. It gives us the dose of reality on it. It's like Leo is where the party was. And after Leo comes Virgo. So in Leo, we're having a party, we're having fun. But when we get to Virgo, it's time to clean the mess up. And that's a very good metaphor to understand the difference between Leo and Virgo in the zodiac. So when we hit Virgo, things start to become very complex, because there's a lot of work to be done. And Vesta in Virgo is a reminder, actually, of the soul, because Vesta is, in my opinion, through my understanding and my research and observations and so forth, Vesta corresponds to the soul work that we do. She's a very mystical type of goddess, in that the work that she does it's not obvious, it's not out there, okay? It's very much the inner soul alchemical work that we do. So this full moon is conjunct Vesta. So that's two feminine bodies together, moon, Vesta. It's a full moon, so it's illuminating something into our understanding at the moment relative to the work that we are continuing on. There is no beginning and end of evolution and of, our spiritual work. It's ongoing. We have different stages and different transitional points that occur that can define being in this space and then moving into that space. But that's not a beginning and an end necessarily. It's more a transitional process and experience that's going on inside us. So there's something about this full moon energy that is speaking to relationships, and it is speaking to perhaps our love and longing to feel, spiritually united with our partner, if we have one. If we don't have one, it could probably trigger our own sort of desires and yearning and wanting for that kind of love. But I think what we need to remember here is that, first of all, no person can bring to you this love that you are longing for from that Piscean Neptune 12th house level. Only divine source creation to all things is the supplier to that for you. No other human being can be. And so it is about recognizing our own inner, perhaps conflicting elements at times with being realistic and being real with who we are, where we're at, and what our expectations are versus our fantasies and dreams and desires and longing and yearning for something that no human being could literally give you. And so this is how I see this full moon energy. It's just a very powerful reminder of Vesta moon, the work that we need to do on ourselves to further improve on the quality of our life, on who we are becoming as a human being, and how we are evolving as a soul. Sun, Venus, there's a lot of love energy present as well. So the love present actually in this full moon, it's when we can tap into this energy from the more esoteric level, let's say, or the more spiritual level, for lack of a better word, because that word is loosely thrown around and it's somehow it's lost its significance in certain ways. But to be spiritually connected within yourself and with divine source creation to all things is, there's no language you could even put around that. It's a very personal experience anyway, so people would describe it differently. But needless to say, Sun, Venus opposite, this moon draws in the feminine and masculine, which would, obviously be projected in our relationships in life. But when we add more awareness into this picture, we can also just look at it from our own inner feminine and masculine, and the love that is healing and growing and evolving inside our own self, for ourself, and of course for our connection with divine source creation to all things. Is that there's a strong spiritual energy going on here. We can't, I mean, I can, unpack this at a very basic, simple, superficial level, but it's not my style, so I won't do that. So I'm going at it from the levels that I normally do. So those of you that are, into that sort of stuff, you've probably already tuned out, which is okay. We can only hear what we are ready to hear. Okay. So I see this as a beautiful gift that can really open. It's like, think about where the new moon started. Venus, Jupiter were right there. That was a blessing in itself. If we can just expand our mind, right, by recognizing the ways in which a gift can be presented outside of the classical, traditional, physical reality of things. There are so many blessings and gifts everywhere if we have the eyes to see and the heart to have the gratitude and appreciation for that, right? So Jupiter Venus conjunction during the new moon, that could, yeah, of course, that could have connected to group type of things and friendships, as I said. But, at a deeper level, it brings in the abundance of the two benefics streaming through this whole lunation cycle, various types of gifts and blessings for you through the archetype of Aquarius, which is actually about expanding our mind and our consciousness and our understanding. So Vesta, feminine. Lunar, moon, feminine. Venus, feminine. Juno, conjunct the south node, feminine. Juno and Venus both correspond to relationship matters in different ways. Vesta corresponds to what we are going to invest in. Virgo is the work that we are doing to improve who we are. No one is perfect. We are all trying to improve every single day, even, as best as we can. So there's a very strong energy here of seeing the reality of where you are at the moment, and the dreams that you may have of what you wish to see and experience and live as well, and having a crystal clear sort of picture of both those almost ends of the spectrum, you could say. Venus Sun conjunction in Pisces is also a really powerful energy for artistic, creative, inspired work through music, art, and various types of creative forms. The one thing, just before I go there, Uranus is forming a trine to this moon. So let me just get some. Oh, I dropped my mic. And hello. All right. Draw. Yes. So I'll just go with that. So there's Uranus, and if we draw a line down there, it's a bit of a squiggly line, but anyway, that the distance between the moon and Uranus forms a trine. So trines are elements that line up, in other words, earth to earth, fire to fire, etc. So of course, if Uranus is trine the moon, then it's going to be sextile the sun and Venus. Now, I think this is important, even though trines and sextiles, they're not dynamic aspects, so that they don't have a big oomph sort of kick to them, but they are very supportive. They bring in timing and opportunities of things to arise in our life that take place without great effort. And Uranus, being the ruler of Aquarius, even though Saturn rules Aquarius as well, when we think of that new moon with that massive, Aquarian stellium, Uranus ruled all those energies in that new moon. And so 2 weeks later, we have the full moon, and Uranus is saying, okay, so whatever you set up during that time, particularly if you are a person who had planets at 23 degrees of Aquarius or thereabouts, or 23 degrees of Leo, which is a conjunction or opposition to the new moon, right? Those of you who have planets in Aquarius, Leo at those degrees would feel this lunation cycle more acutely, as those of you at the moment who are relative to the degrees of the full moon, 8 Virgo Pisces, those of you who have planets at those degrees in Virgo or Pisces will also be impacted more by this full moon than somebody else who doesn't, right? Because not every new moon and full moon is produces miraculous things. We've got to be realistic, but it is most certainly an opportunity every lunation cycle to give birth to something new. And it doesn't have to be a grand, massive thing. It can be the smallest thing. I'm going to clear out my house, and I'm going to get rid of stuff that I've been holding on to for years. Well, that's not a small thing. That's actually quite a big thing. But you get what I'm saying? Like, there's so many new things that you could begin during a new moon, right? And, you want to do that when the new moon is connecting to something in your chart that corresponds to what you're wanting to intend to manifest and so forth. So Uranus being trine and sextile this full moon is also a very good omen and very supportive, because we started the new moon in the sign of Aquarius. Uranus rules that. And so what we started a couple of weeks ago is now being supported in this full moon, because Uranus forms a trine and a sextile to the sun. A trine being the right timing, things can unfold because the timing is right. And a sextile is often opportunity that comes. And well, trine, sextile, timing, opportunity, right? It's as straightforward as that. So we have that helping here as well. And just finally, before I go, there's a Jupiter Mercury conjunction in Aquarius, and that's going to be exact on the 5th of March. And that's a really beautiful, powerful conjunction between Jupiter and Mercury. It's incredible for learning, for learning and growth on the mental levels. I mean, it could be, studying something conventional or alternative, really. It just depends who you are, what you're into, what you need to do at the moment. But relative to expanding your mind and knowledge and wisdom and understanding, this is the signature that really accentuates, amplifies, and brings blessings to that type of experience. And so here they are just building up. So Mercury went recently direct just a couple of days ago. So Mercury is proceeding to move forward through Aquarius. And by the 5th of March, they will both be 17 degrees of Aquarius. Okay. So, 4th, 5th, 6th of March, they're really prominent days actually for this Jupiter Mercury conjunction. But for this full moon, they are also prominent because they are there together. Even though they're not exact, they are still there together. So in the new moon, it was Jupiter and Venus, two benefics, beautiful blessings rather, beautiful omen, a sign of fortune. And here, 2 weeks later at the full moon, Jupiter and Mercury are conjunct. And so here we have the further ideas, you could say, planning, thinking, and so forth, how that can now expand perhaps and take some further fruition, right? So that's another really beautiful, positive omen here, I feel, with Jupiter Mercury. The only thing that is a bit icky, that's not even a word, is it? That's a little bit kind of challenging, is that the Sun and Venus is actually at the midpoint of Mars Juno. So I guess for some who may have, troubling relationships, then I would suspect that this full moon is going to highlight the reality, Virgo, and the ideals, Pisces, and just how different those are in your relationship. And Juno, which is the goddess of marriage and commitment, and Mars, which is about what I want to do, my own personal desires and my own personal autonomy versus commitment, compromise, and so forth. So the two, Mars and Juno, are holding the vibration of the Sun Venus in the scheme of this full moon. So any troubled type of relationships could find that there could be some outbursts here. It may just also be for some people that the full moon illuminates to them that, a person who said they were going to do something, committed to something, and they just haven't done it. And so it angers you, it upsets you because it gets really highlighted during this full moon. As just a small kind of side note, but, it can be important for some people. Okay, so look, there is more to say, but I'll come back. There is a Ceres Chiron conjunction approaching. Ceres just recently ingressed into Aries after having been in Pisces for so long, which has been the loss of the reality that we have known. 2020, and we clearly seeing 2021, up to this point at least, life is not how it was, and nor will it ever go back to how it was. And that was Ceres in Pisces. So now Ceres in Aries is going to take us through a completely different journey. Ceres is never an easy energy, and that's just the truth. But the promising thing that can happen with Ceres is that one can renew and give rebirth to themselves as well. It's a very Pluto type energy as well. But this Ceres Chiron conjunction, look, that's not easy, right? We need to kind of watch that. Have a look at where this Ceres Chiron in Aries conjunction is going to occur, which will be, let me just stop this. Let's just see when it's going to be, actually, because I didn't check. There's that terrible noise. Thank God I've finished. 11th of March, that's when they are exact. So, almost 2 weeks away. So I've got time to come back and talk about that, which I will. Okay, so was there anything else there? No. Okay, so just one final thing to mention. I have to apologize that I haven't had my class ready for this month. I know you guys have been waiting patiently. For those of you that are interested in taking my next class, there's a couple of reasons for that, and the couple of reasons I can comfortably and confidently and honestly be transparent about, and that is that the next class I'm offering is going to be 2 classes because it's so big. There's so much content. And for that reason, it's taken me longer to put together. The second reason, of course, is that I've just been very busy with readings and trying to bring content to you guys on my YouTube channel. And it's been summer and I've had to go to the beach. I'll be honest, I've had to go to the beach. I'm a beach person. I can't not go. So, all that together has created some delays. And there was Mercury retrograde and I lost all my files and I had technological problems, and it's been really crazy, actually, but things are starting to kind of even out a little bit now. So long story short, I will have the Venus class ready. I know you've been very patient and I'm very, very grateful, in around about a week's time. Okay. And that's without promising, that's looking like it's, really likely to be that. Okay. Because I'm more than halfway through in preparation for it. As I said, it's going to be 2 classes because it's huge content, and it takes time. I don't have anybody working for me. I don't have anybody helping me. I'm trying to do everything on my own. I don't have a little assistant and, whatever. So, yeah, thank you for your patience. Okay. Love rules. So this is just a jumper of mine, but I was wearing it yesterday and I thought, well, isn't that really cute that it's been sitting there, while I was just getting myself ready to come and have a chat to you guys about the full moon. And that's Venus in Pisces, love rules, because love is beautiful music and poetry has communicated so many different things about love and how to express that. But love would have to be the experience at the most purest level where there is no fear and no judgment and just complete acceptance and bliss and joy. So that's Venus in Pisces, by the way. So make the most of this full moon energy. Really embrace that beautiful Venus in Pisces, where she will be actually for, hang on, let's just address that actually. So let's just see. So she goes into Pisces just here on the 26th, or it'll be the 25th for most of you. And she will journey around in Pisces until round about there. So around about the 21st of March. So, about 4 weeks, which is the usual amount of time that Venus spends in a sign, unless, of course, she goes retrograde. So 4 weeks of Venus in her exaltation position. Check out where that is in your chart. Where is Pisces in your chart? And really connect with her beautiful vibration and energy. And she can really open you up artistically, creatively, spiritually, with your heart center. There's so much magic that can come out of, and I'm not exaggerating, I have it there natally. So I feel this all the time to some capacity every day. It's a real gift. So make the most of it. And I'll be back soon with more. Much love, and thanks a lot for tuning in. See you soon. And I'll email all of you very soon about the Venus class. Bye for now.